everyone. My name is Emily. I'm our Director of Programs for 11th grade here at Attollo, and I'm so excited to be hosting our professional development series today with our lovely guest, Javita Thompson, who is the Senior Director for Engagement, Mission, and Impact at Elizabethtown College.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So happy to have you. So as always, I love to start off with this question, which is, where are you from and what were some of your hobbies growing up?
So, believe it or not, I am not a Pennsylvania native.
And I'm okay with that.
I was born and raised in Alabama.
Whoa.
Yeah, Sumter County, Alabama, small town, population 3,300. Y'all, it was a small town. So it is a place that is still near and dear to my heart because my mom is still there and I still have family members that are in the space. My hobbies growing up really consisted of, I'm aging myself a little bit when I say this. When I read the question, I was like, oh, we used to play softball. We had a softball league that you could play from like your middle school through high school and into adulthood. It was our way of being active and getting involved in our community, and we would do it as a community. So our little town of Boyle, Alabama would play someone in York, Alabama. It was pretty cool the way that all that worked out, and it was a great way to have longevity within the space and connections with other people within our community. And we just built camaraderie from it. I miss it. I miss things like that so much, and I wish we did more of it because we are certainly more isolated in this time.
Yes. Love softball. I played for a little bit, but I drew pictures in the sand, so we didn't get that far. But I love that that was such an important part of your work, or your upbringing.
Yes.
So how did you get to Lancaster?
So you ready for this story?
Because it's not Alabama.
It's not Alabama, no, not at all. So my husband had done coaching for years in Mississippi, and that's actually where we met. So my husband is a former Millersville University coach. Most people who know me don't necessarily know that unless they've known me for many years. And he was in South Carolina because that's where his family is from. And he said he had gone because he had PTO and I didn't have time off. And I'm looking at the Baltimore Sun newspaper. So we were in Maryland at the time. And he says, I say to him, like, there's a position open at Millersville University for an assistant basketball coach. And he says, Javita, we don't know anybody there. That could be some kind of hick town. I'm like, we are moving from Alabama and Mississippi. Can we talk about hick town right now? And he says, okay. So then we applied, and that's how we ended up in Pennsylvania. Now, how we ended up in Maryland was him getting a job with a referral from his sister working there, but we really didn't like the area quite so much. Sorry, Maryland nights.
It's okay, it's okay.
And we knew we wanted to have kids eventually, so wanted a place that was kid-friendly and family-friendly. And so this is where we raised our two girls, and that's how we ended up here.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that so much. Thinking a little bit about your college journey, you're a first-generation college graduate, which is a very powerful part to your story. How did this experience shape your perspective on education and what opportunity kind of looks like?
Yeah. Not only am I a first-generation college student, I am also a stop-out re-entry student. So as a young adult, knowing all the things, at least thinking you did, right? It wasn't a successful journey. It was partially because of not asking questions and not being engaged in ways that I should have been in that space, and not knowing what I didn't know, not knowing how to self-advocate for things that I needed in that space. So I returned to college as a first-generation student with 2 kids, a spouse, and a mortgage.
Whoa.
So I went back to Millersville in 2009 after leaving a job I had worked for 14 and a half years. And then I completed my bachelor's degree in 2 years. I had 20 credits that transferred even from that long ago from my stop out period. And in 2 years, completed 100 credits to get my degree. I had a plan. I knew what the numbers looked like on paper. I said to my husband, I was like, I think I can do this in 2 years because I don't know that I can stay off work much longer than that. And he says, Javita, I'm not sure about that, you know, because it's not normal. And I went in to see my academic advisor. She says, you might need to go and see the advising center, because I'm not sure how to structure this for you so that you can understand it. She didn't want to tell me no, right? They confused me. I go home. I say to my husband, Fred, they just literally told me nothing. I am so confused by this. And he was like, go back and see someone else. I'm like, the nerve of you to have to tell me that. Especially in this space and time, and being an adult and now having kids and all that. But I did. I went back, saw a graduate assistant, and she tore it up, y'all. Like, she gave me the tools that were needed in order for me to be successful, talked through the classes, what it meant to do general education courses, what the levels of those general education courses were that I needed to complete. And I did it. In the end, by the last semester, I was taking graduate level classes and getting ready to go into a grad program, which was my first graduate degree. It's about advocating for yourself. It's about asking questions. It's about being motivated and not just accepting the first no. Because you get so many of those first no's that it's so easy to be like, they told me I couldn't do it. But you can. You might need to talk to somebody else and see what other creative, exploratory thoughts that might come about from a conversation and building relationships.
As you were telling your story, I thought of a question and then you answered it. But the question was and I wrote it who would have helped you navigate this space? And it sounds like it was that grad student who kind of was like the first person that
was
said
the first
yes.
one.
But who else, I guess, helped you navigate that?
For me, it was faculty within the department. Once I determined what my major was going to be, I found people and they found me. It was also my peers within the group. I was telling this story recently where the students in my program, we had, because it's speech communication, you have to learn how to work as a team and you have to know how to communicate with others. We did a lot of teamwork, and I'm like, I'm unsure if this is the place that I'm supposed to be. They looked at me and said, my mom would never be doing what you're doing. I am super impressed by that. They became my network. I became their network as a parent, being able to guide them in spaces, but also them as students more recently than me, guiding that space. I would have never passed my math class had I not made a friend in math class. And they finally did a lesson I could do. It was real estate math. I had just gotten my real estate license to help me get through college. And I said, I got it. I got you this time. I'm carrying the group. Let's go, y'all. You don't need to do nothing but show up and smile. I will talk through the rest of it. And it was just those kind of building the relationships, talking to people, both staff, students, faculty. I had faculty who really, my advisor that sent me away, but then when I came back with the plan, she understood what that meant, and she was like, you're really determined to do this. We had kids the same age that were in the same school district even. And so we just connected in that way. I still, to this day, have communication with faculty that's there.
That's awesome. And
staff that works there, because it was very pivotal in me figuring out where I belong and how I could connect. Those relationships last for a lifetime. I tell college students that all the time. Like, you go to college, you might meet your best friend here that you talk to 20 years later. High school, they're petty. But college, you might get somebody because y'all go through some stuff together.
That is real. That is real. You kind of touched on a little bit of what you studied, but just to kind of summarize, it was communication, emergency management, and later educational leadership. How did all that evolve? Well, yes, and how do you use what you learned and studied in the work you do now today? So for me, within the speech communication, of course, being in spaces where I am oftentimes presenting to families, parents, students about what we have to offer in programs, it's a very good skill to have, and being able to tell a good story so that they understand and can see themselves in the space. So that I give credit to my comm degree at Millersville University. In the same aspects, with the emergency management degree, although I didn't necessarily do much in the field, it did teach me the art of staying calm in the
heat of the moment, because there's oftentimes crises that happens on campuses that we don't anticipate, and to be able to think logically through them when it is most important to do so. So it has helped me tremendously, and the educational leadership degree kind of came about as a way to really kind of reconnecting back into the space and the work that I was doing to make it make sense for future opportunities that may have been afforded to me.
Absolutely. I guess thinking a little bit about how your life is not just necessarily like crises.
Yeah. No, thank you.
How else do you think what you studied prepared you for life, especially since you were actively like in it? Like I would say you were already living life by the time you went back to school. You had your family, you had already been in the workforce. So what did you notice that your education, like how did that impact, I guess, how you live your life now a little bit more, not so much in your role, but in just general?
I think it gave more of a sense of confidence, and certainly more of a sense of security. The job that I left after 14 and a half years happened to be the job that I went to after I stopped out. And the money that I was making in that job took me 14 years to get to. I didn't want to start back over again.
Yeah.
I wanted to find something else that I could do, that I could enjoy just as much, and be able to have security within. My degree was earned by me. No one can take that from me.
Yeah.
You can take a job from me, you can do whatever you want in that space. And it was really just a business decision that was made, and they eliminated some jobs within the company by merging some together, and 50% of the workforce within the roles were eliminated. So I looked at my husband and said, I'm going to go back to college, and that's what I did. And you know that story already.
Yeah. But the context just like adds more layers to it, where I'm just sitting here like, holy cow.
Yes.
That's crazy. And so impressive to what your community was saying while you were in school. Like I'm incredibly impressed. I would love to think a little bit more about like the community and civic engagement that you do right now at Elizabethtown. In your current role, you focus a lot on building connections between students and the broader community.
Yes.
You also talked about your experience growing up with softball and how that created community and engagement and connection. So from your experience there, what you've learned, and your time in your current role, what does meaningful community engagement actually look like in practice?
To me, it looks like building relationships with other individuals who need some type of support, who you can be their voice and sounding board to. It means getting others involved. It means showing empathy, not sympathy. It means really truly honing in on who they are as people, who are needing whatever source of community engagement that was within that space. I think we oftentimes forget that one of the things that my mom used to always tell me, like, everybody needs somebody sometimes. And I live by that philosophy very much, because I think that it's important for us to always remember that.
Yes. Yes. It's making me think of something that I advise at Muhlenberg College with my sorority. And I didn't even realize that this was something I was saying until I heard one of my advisees say it to someone else, which was, you're a person first, before you're a student, before you're a member of this executive board. And I feel like that, keeping that at the forefront, like people first, like you are a human at the end of the day, and those needs are very important. And it seems like that is how you're building meaningful connection, is by focusing on your needs in that regard. I guess, like, especially in roles that we have, right, as mentors, advisors, how do you ensure that those relationships are truly reciprocal and not just one-sided, especially when the dynamic may not allow for a truly like equal?
Yeah, it depends on the situation and the space, right? Like I have a story of a student who, when I worked at Millersville, I worked in the community service office. I was community service coordinator, entry-level type position, but I worked with community work study, and that's how I got to meet my friends at Attollo.
Love.
Our first union through our community work study and our mentorship that we were doing on our campus. And one of the students I had assigned to a project, which was our Angel Tree Drive, which at the time we were utilizing Salvation Army for that. And this student says to me, explain this program again. And I explain, we give gifts to students who are in the Lancaster community. It stemmed from students who had parents who were incarcerated, ensuring that they had gifts to open for Christmas. She says, I was a recipient of that program when I was younger. Whoa is right. Like, you get chills kind of thinking about, you're not even realizing the connection that you're building in that space. And to this day, there's a relationship there, and there's connection there, and there's purpose there with what we do.
Yeah. No, I felt the chills.
Yeah, I still do. Years later.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So how did you make the jump from working at Millersville to where you are now? Like, what was that journey like? Because part of me is like, how could you give up being a community service coordinator?
I know, right? So the job as community service coordinator was actually a half-time, is what Millersville called the job. And I did it for 4.5 years as a half-time employee, and, sought after other opportunities to kind of compensate. And it was the best time of my life to be doing that kind of work.
Yeah.
So I am not apologetic in any way for that. I look back on it now and recognize that that was a pivotal age for my kiddos, so that I could be there for them in ways that I couldn't have if I had been working full time. So a full-time opportunity came about in Shippensburg within the community engagement circle.
Okay.
And so transformation after transformation in terms of jobs, and opportunity after opportunity in terms of job, even within that institution, because of changes in leadership, made it where I was learning more and I was growing more. And then, of course, once the kids graduate and I don't have to worry about tuition remission, because I had a 50% tuition remission.
That's real.
For working at a state institution full time with the particular bargaining unit that I was underneath. And she had gotten a scholarship from Promising Scholars for the full tuition paid. So for almost 6 years, I did this drive to Shippensburg and still lived in Lancaster.
Whoa.
Because I didn't want to uproot my kiddos. I made the sacrifice for me. 3 vehicles later, and many miles on the road. Yeah. And then finally, a position opens up at Elizabethtown for the director for Community and Civic Engagement. And I'm like,
let's go.
Like 100% of the job I had already basically done, whether it was creating new programs, working within community engagement. It was just a no-brainer. And it was 25 minutes versus an hour and a half. So sold the pitch, got to where I was in that space and time, been doing that work, and then made some transitions even now within Elizabethtown.
That is insane. Do you have any good audiobooks though from those drives?
Honey, yeah, we'll talk.
Okay,
I'll pull them all up so I can tell you what I love the most. And
We'll circle back to that at the end. Maybe we'll end with a list of books.
Yeah.
I'm gonna ask because I love a little podcast audiobook.
Honey, yeah, there's some. Yeah.
Okay, great. Talk. Okay, we'll circle back. You kind of mentioned this a little bit in terms of civil engagement and what it can look like. And I also recognize that, especially for our high school students, this could be a pretty either new topic or new way to describe something that they've already been experiencing. How do you make it feel real, relevant, and accessible, especially for young people who are just starting to find their voice in this abstract concept?
Sometimes it can be very hard. A lot of times it's them realizing something because it happened to them. What? This can happen to me kind of situation? Or doing things like taking them on a civil rights spring break trip where their eyes are opened to what happened before and realizing the cruelty that sometimes took place in those spaces, but also the strength that took place in those spaces as far as advocacy from the foot soldiers and the organization portion and how long some of those pieces and movements took. We take it for granted because we read it in a book and we don't see the people that were a part of it. And in that space, they get a chance to see people in places and walk across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. Like, have you ever done that before? It's empowering.
Yeah.
I've done it for years, and it's still one of those things that I look forward to when I get there.
You started to touch on this with this example of like visiting important stops along what was the civil rights movement. Why is experiential learning so important? And like, why is going outside of the classroom? You kind of started to touch on it, but I'd love for you to actually dive a little bit deeper into what students gain that they might not gain in a traditional setting, like reading out of a textbook.
Right. The whole idea of putting something into practice that you read, right? A doctor doesn't become a doctor without doing a residency.
Speak on that.
Right? So putting that into concept, you are practicing what you are learning in the classroom by going out and doing service, by getting involved with your community, by doing an internship, by doing a job shadowing. You're putting into practice and testing the waters, to be honest. I completed a few internships while I was in college in my 2-year span because I was testing the waters. I wanted to know, do you want to go back to corporate? Because I don't know if that treated you as well as you thought it did. Do you want to go stay into nonprofit? Maybe. That's where I stayed. So I guess that was actually pretty good. But giving you an opportunity to evaluate where space you feel like you belong in most, and really thinking about what that means to do the work that you're going to school for. They changed the structure of education for those that are education majors because they used to not go out into the field until their second or third year, and by that time they're so far into the major that it's hard to shift. So that students could actually be in the classroom and say, oh, nope, that's not for me, or I love it. I really want to engage with students more. I can't wait till I do my final field experience. So there's value in practice.
I'm almost wondering if we need to, like, as mentors and educators, highlight that learning you don't want to do something is still an outcome of the...
Yes.
Well, I'm just
because we learn from the tough things.
Yeah.
We don't learn from the easy things.
Yeah.
It's the class that you made a C in that you're so proud of that you'll tell the world that you made a C in versus the class that you made an A in and you just coasted through. Like, it's that kind of experience.
Yeah.
You learn just as much from the experience that you don't like as you do what you do like.
Yes.
And how you can actually take that experience to the next level.
Yes.
Because why you now understand yourself, and they're finding themselves in college, right? So you have this group of students that really have gone into the space of thinking the way that their parents think a lot of times, and this is their first time at freedom.
Yes.
This is their first time at self-authorship.
Yes.
This is their first time to really tell what they feel and how and what they believe in. So this is another time for practice.
I love it. I love it. I guess I'm really curious, when thinking about civic engagement, experiences outside of the classroom, I almost, like, my brain is kind of categorizing them in like a couple of different stakeholders that you have to work with, right? You have your students that ultimately, like, you would not be able to do this work if they weren't there to take your class and be a part of the program.
Yes.
You have to work with community partners to offer them those in-person activities, experiences, but then you're also balancing in institutions and making sure that you're staying aligned with institution priorities. How do you navigate situations where priorities of these different, I guess, stakeholders in a way don't always align?
These competing priorities go together and you have to figure it all out. And sometimes it's called for creativity in the space. Sometimes it's bringing folks together so they have a common ground to talk through some of the things that they're seeing. Recently, for example, we brought in the community partners for our Bonner Leader program because they were at different levels. The program started in 2022. It has a service leadership component to it where students have done service outside of in high school and wanting to transition that into college. They work with a community partner for 4 years, so we sometimes adopt new partners. So the new ones versus the ones that's been doing this since 2022 and how they've elevated what work the students are doing and gaining a better understanding and going from just direct service to something more meaningful to them and to the organization and a bigger picture than what they would have started out doing. Sharing that ideas in that space by bringing them into a luncheon and say, you talk a little bit about your organization and how you've connected with students. Now you tell me a little bit about what you're doing with yours. And I had some that were, I like this, I think we should also introduce this as far as an component of training. I'm willing to come in and talk to them and have a session on grants, and so they can understand better where the funding comes from, where the resources often comes from for nonprofit agencies, where the other organizations, like, I didn't even know we could do all of that. Like, this is the best meeting ever. And next time when we come for the next luncheon in the fall, I'm gonna have some tangible ideas to share because we've had them doing, and we should be having them doing.
Yeah. So it almost sounds like in order to compete against these different priorities that people might have, you actually have to put them in a room to realize there's more alignment than they may have seen. Yeah. I have more questions, but I also want to make sure that I open it up to our audience, as I'm sure I'm not the only one with questions. And there are mics for you to speak into if you have a question. Okay, kick us off.
Hey Javita, thank you so much for being here. It was actually a pleasure to actually hear, and I love your spirit, by the way. So bubbly, so energetic. But the question I had, you talked a little bit about approaching situations, I think, back in Millersville with logic, but I wanted to also know, how do you balance the logical versus the emotional side of things, especially when it's crisis or emergency management? People have emotions, and all kinds of things going through their heads. So how do you balance the two?
Yeah, there's a respect for the stories that are told and the emotion that goes along with it. I, as you can already see, might be a little bit emotional about a lot of things because it goes along with the personality and who I am. So the gift I think I have is being able to really listen to someone's story and provide that comfort of knowing they're listened to. Outside of this work and education, I was in retail. And in that, I used to work for an optometrist. I managed a vision center before becoming a district manager. And with that, she used to have this saying, she's like, it's a full moon tonight. So we're gonna have some challenges coming through the door. So Javita, I just need you to be prepared, because she knew that I was the person to sit down and make sure that that person was heard in order for them to feel heard and figure out what was wrong, even if it was just that they needed someone to sit and listen to them in that space. And that was a gift that I took from her, knowing that she acknowledged that I had it, right? Because sometimes I reverted back and was like, so how can I help you? They're like, what? Nobody ever asked me that. The gift of listening, being able to express themselves and surely give the feelings that they need to get out so that they know that they are being heard. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that question, because I often find that perception is reality for people, and if their feelings and emotions are creating a perception that is maybe not necessarily the most helpful in the time of a crisis, listening and like building that trust with someone by just listening them and making sure they feel heard will allow you to then do the work that you need to do.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Leo.
I feel like you have some really interesting higher ed experience, and you've worked in higher ed during some very interesting times.
Yeah.
COVID being one of them, residential transitions, Black Lives Matter movement as well. Can you talk about what you've learned during those years, like in those transitions that happened at the national level, but certainly felt in higher ed?
Yeah, having a level of flexibility, having a level of creativity, having a level of exploration, having a level of integrity within the work, grounding it in what is student success, to ensure that individuals know that you have their best interests at heart, no matter what's going on in the space and no matter what's going on in the world outside of it. Really, again, honing in, listening to their stories and making them know that they are being heard, because that's hard. You're not listening to me is oftentimes the thing that makes people upset when they're talking to you in conversation. Show that you're listening to them. Create space for revisiting with them about concerns that they may have had. Check in occasionally. Hey, want to check in with you to make sure everything was okay. Had a student recently who took a trip with us, and when we got back to campus, I emailed, hey, you should stop by to see me. I'd like to check in with you. He didn't respond. Not unusual in this day and age. But I saw him. I might have saw him this week. I saw him, and we had a conversation that day on the spot, because oftentimes you get them in the moment, they become a little bit more vulnerable, and they're like, you want to talk now? Yes, I do. So we took a little walk and had a little talk, a walkie-talkie.
That's so funny. Terry, yeah.
Hi, thank you so much. So in reading a bit about your bio and some of the things you've done, I know that you've led discussions around especially like racial issues with students, and that can be a pretty hot topic. And I'm just curious, I also in undergrad, I went to a small, predominantly white undergrad, and I often felt that there was a sort of a disconnect between what the students of color and just marginalized students in general on campus felt like they needed, and they needed the people around them to know and understand, and actually getting the other people to know, understand, and engage with it. So, and how do you create spaces where maybe, people that issues don't directly affect still feel like they need and want to engage? Like, how do you get them to see it as something that involves them too, even if it's maybe not something that really strikes them as something engaging or interesting or whatever it may be?
I talk to the people that matter and that can make some changes happen. And I don't levitate it to people on my same level. I elevate it up so that there's an opportunity for them to hear that story of that student and the concerns that they are facing. I become their voice when they don't feel comfortable enough to be the voice for themselves in those spaces, because oftentimes the students don't realize that they can go and talk to administrators on campus to say that they have a concern. But they can, and if they don't feel comfortable enough doing it, we try to advocate on behalf of them in that space. And I'll tell you a little story. When I started at Elizabethtown College, I had a student, we'll call him JB, still love him, still talk to him. And I walked into my office, and I didn't see him when I went to the office, but I saw him when I got ready to come out of the office, and I said, hi. He says, hi? He says, where did you come from? And I said, I'm the new director for the Center for Community and Civic Engagement. And he says, my name is JB. It's nice to meet you. It was the presence of someone who looked like him. That was enough to provide him with comfort to be able to speak. And we, to this day, I became his advisor of the club that he founded on the campus. He still comes into our social justice fair to do speeches and workshops. And when he left campus to find a job in the area, in the field that he wanted to work in, which was around community engagement, I sent him, I was like, you might be interested in this position. He's still doing that work to this day, That's 3 years
awesome.
later. So presence makes a difference.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do we have any other audience questions? I have time for one more. Okay, Leo.
Leo said, my turn.
I mean, I got 100 questions, but I'm just curious. And just hearing you talk, I definitely picked up on your energy. And I've always, I've known you for enough time to get why people love to be around you. Talk to me about your values. Actually, I'm just curious because I think that people see you and you're very polished, and it's very easy for you to talk about engaging with students. But what are your specific values? How does that influence who you are and how you present yourself?
Yeah. I think it's really grounded in a faith background, having grown up in really a household with a mom who believed in the power of prayer. So there's integrity there, there's faith there, there's so many values that humanize the person, no matter who that individual is that you're speaking with. And I think there's value in that. There's integrity, there's hope within the space when you're, having a conversation with someone who doesn't quite know which direction they're going in. There's just really a choice to be upset about the things that are going on in this world, or a choice to be the person who says, I'm going to try to make a difference in that space. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah.
Now, I said we'd circle back.
Okay, you ready? Pull it out.
Yeah, well, I would just love, I think it would be, I really do think in the same way, I'm sure you've heard this phrase before, like you are who you surround yourself with.
Yeah.
I also think like you are what you read and what you listen to. And I think more of our students should strive to want to be civically engaged, and I would love to hear what you listen to, which might put them in that direction.
Yeah. So one of the books that I read that was super empowering to me, because oftentimes I would read I like memoirs, so I should say that first and foremost. Like memoirs are my jam. I love hearing about someone's stories. That is the thing that really makes me tick. It's whether it's me talking to you in person or me listening to it through an audiobook. So Tara Westover is her name, and she wrote the book Educated.
Yes.
I got some fans over here.
Yes.
And through that book, she talks about her story in such a raw way that makes you think, how did you survive that? And become who you are today? And why would anybody treat any human that way? Yeah. It makes you look at life differently. So that's one. I absolutely love Trevor Noah, Born a Crime. If you have not read that one, you should read that one. His book talks about touches on South Africa and the apartheid. It gives some comparative analysis of what happens here in the U.S. to what happened to, you have to put the inference in it, to what happened in South Africa. You can see it better, the errors of your ways or someone else's ways, much better than you can see your own. So reading that book for me opened up some of the things that we saw that were happening here within our space. Let's see what else I got in here. I just got done reading Americana. We were gonna have Chidi Amanda on our campus, but she ended up not making it, unfortunately, because of some personal things that happened with her and her family. And I read that book and I saw some of the things that I oftentimes hear from students who are from international background coming onto our campus, and understanding there's a difference in what our traditional BIPOC students experience and what our international students experience. I knew that before reading it, but she just reiterated in a way that was very powerful. Highly recommend. Highly recommend. I'll give you one more.
Beautiful.
Let's see. Something else I read recently. I already did that one. Uphill by Jamil Hill. She's pretty raw with her story and telling her how she became who she was and how many things she had to fight through as a young lady, becoming who she was, and even in her career. So she even touches on some of that. So another one.
I really appreciate this list that I will be embracing.
Yes.
I do hope that one day a book from you can make it onto the list.
Ooh.
Who said that?
Wait. I better listen, I better drop one for my friend then. So, like, she just published a book.
Oh, yeah, you gotta drop it now.
I gotta drop it. Let me give you the right title, because I'd be messing it up. And I can't mess it up for her, because she's gonna get me in trouble. I'll be in trouble with her. This is a BFF from high school, and we both ended up in higher education, and she does educational justice work. And her book just got published in March.
Congratulations.
So reading the book before it was even published and giving feedback and all those things. And if you look close enough, you'll see some credits or acknowledgments from yours truly. Reimagining educational justice in the face of opposition. Reimagining educational justice in the face of opposition. She really hones in on the history of what has happened in our country as it relates to education and the inequities that are within that space.
Love. Well, I don't love the
right.
Yeah, I love that she's addressing it.
But
She's
we're addressing it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Worthy of a read and a discussion, and she's always open for talks and things like that. So she's scheduled to come to Elizabethtown in June to do a talk at our Pennsylvania Black Conference on Higher Education. Another plug for those that are interested in attending that as well.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for this wonderful conversation. I truly believe that a lot of the values that I hold are very in line with your values. And so I found this very fun to and affirming almost, or not almost, very affirming to have this kind of a conversation. And now not only do we all get to leave with little nuggets of information, we have a list of 5 books that we can now read.
Yes.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.